St. David, in times you brought peace and were determined to bring trust. Please help us throughout our lives to show strength in all areas and to bring peace where it is needed. Bless us and help us make a school that God is proud of. Amen. Welcome to the St. David's High School podcast. This episode focuses on revision techniques, as our senior school pupils are currently in the middle of their prelim exams. We hope you enjoy. This week we have Mrs. Nelson joining us from the Humanities faculty. How are you, Mrs. Nelson?
I'm good, thank you.
And we also have Mrs. P joining us from the Maths faculty. How are you?
Good.
As you are our teaching staff on the podcast, we would like to get to know you a little better for students or parents listening that are not familiar with you. Can you tell us what subject you teach and what is it about that subject that you love so much?
So I teach history, a little bit of modern studies as well, but mainly history. And I don't know, I just love it. I didn't actually like it very much in first and second year when I was in school, and then I don't know, I just ended up taking it in S3 and ended up just falling in love with the subject. I just like teaching about like mainly Scottish history. That's like kind of my passion, and it's just amazing when you see like young learners kind of finding the same kind of things interesting. And there's a lot of our seniors that are going in to study history at university. And I like to think that I've tried to help that happen in some sort of way. So it's really lovely that you can influence someone to do that. So I suppose I love that probably the most, is inspiring people to also fall in love with it.
That's excellent. And Mrs. P?
So I teach maths, and I love mathematics in general, just for the structure and logic behind it and how each little part kind of fits together in like a bigger picture, kind of like a puzzle. And also I'm like very passionate about the applications of maths in sciences, technology, computer science in general. I think people don't really fully understand that like little bits of maths are found everywhere in the technology that we use nowadays, and we need to know these little bits to get to understand how technology works, how some things related to science, economy works, and I think that's fascinating.
We are also joined by two senior pupils, Victoria and Lewis. We're glad to have you join us. Thank you for taking time. We would like to get to know you a little better. Can you tell us what you enjoy most about studying at St. David's, and, if any, what subject is your favourite?
Well, I quite like the teachers, I like the teaching here at St. David's. I think it's quite personal, and I enjoy that I'm able to share what I enjoy with students and teachers alike. For me personally, I'm going into psychology. So I actually recently got an offer from Edinburgh Uni. So yeah, I'm going into psychology.
Oh, fantastic. And Lewis?
I quite enjoy like just learning here, and it's like right now I'm doing modern studies, and it's like the environment you learn in, it just feels really nice, and it's like no matter what, you're always like kind of getting backed up, and you've always got that support there that you need to like learn all your courses. And for me, crash hiring modern studies, it's definitely an experience, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Excellent. I think a lot of students listening as well would share your experiences, so that's really good to hear. Moving on to our main section for today, let's get into today's topics. We're talking about prelims. So the prelims have started. The first week of prelims are out their way. For those who aren't familiar with prelims, a prelim is a practice exam to help you prepare for your final SQA exam. So pupils will have a prelim for each subject that they have chosen to study, and the prelims will take place under exam conditions. So in regards to prelims, Mrs. Nelson, from a teacher's perspective, how would you say prelims are beneficial to teachers?
For the teachers, I think it's beneficial for me just to assess whether or not pupils are coping with the content and the amount that's required. Obviously, so many different pupils have different needs. Like there's some that do need a bit extra time with things, or some that are struggling to read in a certain amount of time and things like that. And actually allowing all of that to take place throughout the year isn't quite the same as like a full prelim or like a full exam. So I think just actually allowing them the experience and the familiarity of sitting in a hall for 2 hours, 20 minutes, because my prelim and my exam's really long. Kind of just giving them the chance to experience that. I remember last year with my advanced hires, had 3 pupils do their 3-hour prelim, and they said that they were so thankful that they had a chance to do the prelim in the full exam setting, because they said doing half a prelim would almost make them wonder like what else is there and what's next and what if I'm not able to cope. So I think it's just good to just have the experience of what the exam is going to look like, because at the end of the day it is standardized, isn't it, for all pupils? So I just need to basically use that as evidence to see whether or not they're coping and what other support I need to put in place, what else the class are missing. Like there's some trends I'm already noticing from marking the prelims, that there's definitely things I need to go over. But it's also a really positive experience. Like our National 5 prelims that we're marking just now, like the structure I'm seeing is outstanding. It's just amazing how hard they've all worked to ensure that they're all meeting the requirements for each question, and I'm just really proud of them as well. And I've not even finished marking the batch yet. So it's just great to see, kind of how they're getting on with it and how they're coping. It just informs whether or not you're able to kind of put them forward for the exam with a decent grade that they're also happy with, that you're happy with, and it allows us to assess whether or not they're able to cope with the demands of the exam, really.
And Mrs. P, I'll ask the same question to you.
So I agree with everything Mrs. Nelson has been saying about like how people are actually coping. The stress is sometimes, I feel like we don't fully understand the stress until we see them doing the prelim. We see them how they react before their actual prelim and after, and how they go through all of the emotions. And that's very important for me as well, because I can speak with them afterwards and I can either encourage or like tell them they need to study more. In specific to like maths related or like sciences, I presume they're very similar. We are looking for like fine details. Sometimes the questions are like very precise. We need to write answers in a specific way. So as we're going through the marking, we can see the fine details that like we still need to speak with the classes. And we also find out a lot of background knowledge that we still need to focus on, because we are doing like a revision scheme after the prelim, and we focus on what has been going good or bad in the prelim. So we're trying to target specific areas, and we're giving specific advice individually to pupils to help them either study better or just cope with the stress in general. So that's what I can say to this.
Yeah. And Victoria and Lewis, you guys have undergone prelims before. In your experience, how are prelims beneficial to students?
Well, I like to think it is like an experience to help see what you need to improve on. So obviously, unlike your exams, you'll get your prelims back and you'll be able to see where you've maybe went wrong and areas that you need to like develop on. But then it also gives you the opportunity to see like what doesn't really need as much improvement. And the whole idea of being able to improve is that you're able to then focus on key areas where you've gone wrong, and then you can make them better for your final exam and hopefully put them into practice.
And Victoria?
So for me, I think prelims help the most with figuring out if my revision methods are working. So I'm able to see if, let's say, me just repeating things is working to help me remember all the information I need, or if the way I'm doing my questions is helping me with the prelims. And from getting the prelim back, I'm able to see what changes need to be made with my revision methods. And it also gives you an idea of how the exams are themselves. So it helps with like time management and things like that. So it gives me an idea.
Victoria, we're talking about revision and study techniques there. What type of study techniques or revision techniques do you use?
So I used to just repeat things over and over, which actually from studying higher human biology, I learned that it's a shallow form of remembering information. So it's better to actually rewrite information. For example, like mind maps, flashcards, and just doing questions from your notes that you wrote personally rather than just using the notes the teachers give you.
Lewis, do you have any exam techniques that you use to revise?
I'm personally prefer to get like my teacher to give me like different exam questions. So like with my main one, modern studies just now, I'm often getting many like, you know, past paper questions as exams. So I can do my essays and begin to like develop a better structure for them, and then getting them to be looked over, and then I'm able to improve on those essays. So if like, for example, those essays do come up in my exam, I'm prepared for them, and it's also like at the same time I'm learning all the information as well.
Mm-hmm. And Mrs. P and Mrs. Nelson, we've obviously been through school ourselves, sat our exams, sat our prelims, been to university, sat exams as well. What sort of advice do you have to anybody, or what type of techniques do you use when it comes to studying?
Well, when I was at school, for me, like I did quite a lot of like humanities subjects. I wasn't really very science based. So for me, it was just like things like higher modern studies, history, etc. And yeah, just kind of rewriting essays out and trying to memorize them and then rewriting them again and working with timed conditions worked for me personally. I agree with what Wiktoria was saying. Putting things into your own words is definitely a benefit, because if you use someone else's notes, it's never something you've created. So it's hard for you to memorize someone else's words or information. For me, for National 5 and higher and advanced, flashcards is always a good way of getting information down to like the minimum amount that you need. So for example, like 6 points for Nat 5, and then if you're then able to test this with somebody and then expand verbally is the best way. Whereas I think there's a lot of misconceptions about just highlighting absolutely everything and just having all this information on a page that you need to consume, and it's just far too much. But you need to just verbally be able to kind of explain it to yourself and test yourself. But yeah, kind of using your teacher where you can, like this time that we have at the moment where it is fairly quiet between prelims, and you've maybe sat a prelim here and there, and you've got that time of maybe one-to-one with your teachers to grab them out, even a prelim you've already sat, is a good time to just iron out any problems that you have or ask for more revision tips. But there's tons of division methods out there. I mean, even like the whole techniques of working past like 5 minutes. Like if you can get past 5 full minutes with no distractions, then you're likely to do like 25 minutes extra work or something like that. There's loads of like revision apps like that work differently for people that are maybe just slightly more creative and just prefer like visible motivation. There's like an app that has like this forest and ridiculous stuff like that like every time you touch your phone, like the forest dies and stuff like that. So it like encourages you to like build this green forest, so you like motivate yourself. I know that sounds a bit ridiculous, but it does work because phones are just such a distraction sometimes because we're in and out of information. But there's just so many revision techniques out there that work for different subjects. But past papers, again, what Lewis was saying, every time you do a past paper, just make sure it's timed and get it marked before you do the next one. Because there's a lot of people that hand in like eight questions, but then what if you've practiced the same error 8 times? So you might as well just get one marked and then do the next one, and then get one marked and do the next one, as opposed to like just like doing the same thing over and over and then maybe actually practicing the same error.
Mrs. P, did you have anything to add?
I'm more into a science base, so I've done a lot of science, lots of maths, computing. So rewriting notes is something that was very useful, because sometimes when you write your notes and when you do the examples in class, you might be a bit fast, you might be speaking with someone close to you, and going over what I have done in class and checking if my calculations were correct, if I don't have any mistakes in the notes, if I was unsure about it. So I used to rewrite the majority of my notes and highlight information, make a list of formulas. I always had lists of formulas that I had to remember for different subjects. And I also used to have step-by-step instructions for the questions that are like a bit longer. So it'd be, what's the first thing I need to do? What am I doing next? And I used to have steps like step 1, step 2, step 3 for each kind of question. And in terms of what Ms. Nelson was saying about the apps and the phone, I used to put a timer. So I used to have a timer and be like, I have to stay and do something for 20 minutes. And then if I managed to pass 20 minutes one day, the next day I would do like, let's see if I can go and do this for 30 minutes. So I used to time myself until I managed to to do as much as like a past paper. So like if a past paper was 1 hour and 15 minutes, I would see if I can train myself to get to do something without touching my phone or looking at the TV or doing something else for 1 hour and 15 minutes, so that I could have myself fully concentrated on the task at hand.
They're very different approaches from approaches that I took myself. One of the approaches that I took is I done something called sketchnoting, and it's where, in terms of retaining information, for me, I used to continuously rewrite like the answer. I would write it again and again and again until it stuck. But one method I found with sketchnoting is it's actually a visual technique. So it's where you read a passage or you read your notes and you take the big ideas that come from them and you actually turn it into a picture. So you draw it into a picture or picture format or little graphics. And it's research out there that shows that you're more likely to remember a picture or an icon to represent something rather than writing pages or masses of information down. And I found that out when I was in 5th year. And at first, I kind of thought it was strange. I used to do it because I thought, God, maybe I'm not studying properly. Maybe this isn't real. But the more I looked into it, I found that a lot of people were doing it. And I'll put a little link to some of the videos about sketchnoting and some of the other stuff that you guys are talking about in the show notes you can refer to. But it's a really, really helpful way that I found to memorize things, because when I was in the exam, I could recall my mind map, and then I could think of the picture that I had drawn, and then the information would come to the forefront of my mind, which was really helpful. So it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't already. Just moving on to our next section, we want to sort of talk about what type of support is there at St David's for people who are going to be sitting their prelims. Mrs. Nelson and Mrs. P, are you running any after-school classes at the moment?
Yeah, tons of study support. We've offered a lot of lunch times as well, but usually kind of the common Nat 5 ones at the moment are Tuesday after school, and the higher is a Thursday after school. Advanced higher have kind of just been moving around when it sort of suits them, but usually a Tuesday, Wednesday. But we can kind of move it around depending on when children need to appear, because obviously there's buses and other time constraints and various things. So sort of just whenever. But Google Classroom's also a support from home. We can always use Google Meet where we need to. If somebody had a quick question that they couldn't write, or they want to just contact us over Google Classroom or email. I mean, we're in quite a good position now where we feel that we can have contact outside of school when we've got a question that kind of prevents us maybe moving forward with some of our division. So I think all of the kind of online stuff definitely aids that.
And Mrs. P?
For math, we have study club for all higher, National 5 higher and advanced higher, Monday after school and Wednesday after school. In general, we also use the same methods as Mrs. Nelson was saying, using Google Classroom and everything. So, for example, I have a general assignment that I put in on Google Classroom that is called Ask Me a Question. So that absolutely anyone can send me any sort of messages in there or comment or like write to each other using that specific assignment to ask either me questions or ask each other questions about different things. And I think the technology and the way we use Google Workspace in general is really powerful with this, because we can offer a lot of support. And it doesn't take us long to answer a question if someone puts it on Google Classroom. So we can do that through the day. And it's really helpful, as we found all of this feedback from pupils. They really appreciate this.
Excellent. And Lewis and Victor, have you been attending any after school classes?
Well, I've not been able to attend any after school classes. However, one I'm trying to get to go to is like modern studies, and I think it's just like a case of being able to like find the time, and like as well as that as we said, the teachers are actually able to cater quite well to when you're able to like do it. So I think the useful thing would be is like when they ask you about what days you can attend, you're always able to give them an idea of what days you can attend. And as well as that, they'll usually be quite like quite good at choosing different dates that let you get involved?
For me, last year I used to go a lot. I always attended after school revision. It really helped me actually, but this year I only have 2 exams and I think I'm able to do it myself, although I know a lot of other people are using the teacher after school revision time. As well as that, I think it's harder in S6 because a lot of us have part-time jobs and there's a lot of other responsibilities we have. But the teachers always try and move around, and they're always really helpful if someone does need that extra space, or just if at home maybe things are too loud, they can't concentrate. It's always really helpful, and I know a lot of people that have always found a lot of support from the teachers for prelims.
St David's also have the mental health check-in, which is available for pupils who are perhaps feeling a little bit overwhelmed by their prelims or their examinations, so you can get help from teachers that way. Moving into sort of the worries or fears about exams, because there will be some S3s who are listening to the podcast or some S4s who are currently sitting their prelims for the first time. We want to try and talk about some of the fears that they might have. So Lewis and Victoria, what were some of the fears that you maybe had about doing prelims for the first time or your exams?
I think for me personally, my biggest fear is always time. I think myself, I've got like extra time in my exams. However, like I often find that even with that extra time, you still kind of feel under pressure and you're just always never sure if you're going to have enough time. And I think it's like just learning to control yourself and contain yourself and like use like different time management techniques that might be helpful for you. And yeah, that's like my biggest fear, just not having enough time to finish it. So say I'm writing an essay, I might not make it to the conclusion and I start to get really worried and panicked if like I maybe lost out on marks that I know I could have easily got. And I think that's my biggest fear personally for having the prelims and stuff, just being able to learn better ways to manage my own time.
And Victoria?
I think my biggest fears are always just stressing out way too much the day before the prelim or the exam, to the point that, let's say, I forget everything in the exam, or I don't sleep from the stress, like I'm not able to, I'm thinking too much, because I think that I could have done more. But I think it's really important to take time to yourself the day before and not overwork, never stress too much, because it will just make it so much worse for yourself. People think that doing more revision the day before is better, but I think you need to have a break to let your brain actually take that information in and remember it. And as well as that, it's just missing out information. And I feel like a lot of people struggle to not stress too much because it's difficult to know what's gonna, well, you don't know. You don't know what's coming up in the exam, the prelim. So it's stressful if you've missed something out or you just start overthinking way too much about it.
I just wanted to talk about, I've done a lot about research and I found some common misconceptions that perhaps people have about exams, and I'll just get your opinions on these, or if you have any advice on these topics. So one of the common misconceptions about exams is that, similar to what you were saying, Victoria, some people think you need to spend 24 hours a day studying. What would you guys say is a good amount of time to study?
Personally for me, I'm not like one that I'm able to keep like, I've often struggled to keep like my attention span going for like hours on end. So for me, I'd say like a good amount of time to study is like anywhere between like the half an hour to an hour mark. And then as well as that, another technique I've found quite useful is like revising in short bursts. So maybe just doing 15 minutes at a time. That often just helps to get in your head and lets you think about it for a while, and then you can go back to it again and revise for another 15 minutes.
And Mrs. P, what type of time would you recommend a student to revise for?
So I highly agree with Lewis. That's exactly what I wanted to say. Like 24 hours studying, that is just a fantasy, to be honest. Like short amounts, even 15 minutes, do something and then take a break and come back 15 minutes later. or do a subject for half an hour, take a break, and do another subject afterwards. And one of the things I have been recommending to people, but I know it works differently with each person, is sometimes the day before the exam is better to not do anything related to that exam, because anything you're going to look at, you're either going to panic and going to feel like, what if I don't remember this, or I don't have time to look over the other stuff, because it is a lot of things we have to remember for exams. So I sometimes recommend to people that like stress too much is like the day before, don't do anything in terms of the exam that you have the next day. Or if that is not possible for you, stop at a decent time and go to bed. Like stop at like 7, 8 o'clock and don't do nothing afterwards, like completely nothing. Watch a movie, play a game, go to sleep, read a book, or like in the morning of the exam, again, I don't recommend for people to start looking at like old formulas, old topics, old information or something, because it's just going to give you that sense of like panicking, because what if I'm not going to remember this? What if this is not going to be in it and it's going to be the other thing? And you definitely don't have enough time to look at everything.
Yeah, I remember like when I was doing my hires, like my dad would actually scream at me for being up so late with all my notes on my bed, and he's like, your room needs to be like a separate place from studying, and like he used to say, what you don't know now you never will, and he probably was right. Like 10 minutes before the prelim, I'm sitting looking at my notes. I mean, what are you really going to get from that? So taking some time away. But for me personally, like I've just got this sort of guilt thing, and I don't know if like for me, like sitting in front of my notes just makes me like, or made me feel better. And like I felt like I was at least like trying to study, like, but it isn't something I would recommend. Like definitely take some breaks and go for fresh air and just drink plenty of water. And then make sure that you are like rewarding yourself. If you've done like 2 hours studying and done like loads of mods questions or something, and you've sent them off and you're waiting for your teacher to reply with them, go and have a walk or go and watch something and relax, because your brain can only take so much in. And definitely prioritize. Like something I'm always kind of saying is like, you know, pupils at the moment are saying I'm so stressed and I don't know what to do first. I've got loads of exams at the same kind of time, but I've always kind of thought like diamonds, pebbles and stones. So like your diamonds absolutely need to be like they need to look at now. Like you need to deal with them now, or your prelims tomorrow, so you need to look at them. Your stones can maybe, your pebbles can maybe wait like, I don't know, a few days, something like that, and then your stones can wait a week. Like just ignore it. Like 2 weeks before my higher modern studies exam, I hadn't even touched a note of it yet because I just had so many that were so close together. So that full 2 weeks, I was lucky enough to have all that time just to consolidate on that one like exam. But I think something that we need to remove in terms of misconceptions as well is like, oh, I haven't learned that, or I need to learn all of this. Like you have learned it, you just need to revise it. It's in your head, it's in your memory, but you just need to bring it forward. Like when we think about like, you know, stuff like for Lewis and Victoria at the moment, we're doing quite a lot of work on like retrieval practice and things just as staff, and we're talking about like, can we remember our head teachers at primary and things like that? No, but if I sat and thought about it for a really, really long time, I probably would be able to remember the names, but I'd have to really take myself back to that situation. So yeah, sorry, I've gone on a bit long there, but just definitely don't spend 24 hours a day studying or try to even meet that, because you're just fooling yourself. That you're getting anything done that's productive, and you might as well prioritize your mental health and like your actual ability to feel awake and ready, rather than sitting in front of your notes and maybe sitting on your phone not really doing much.
Absolutely, yeah, that's great advice, I think, from all. Our second misconception, our last misconception, one that I think a lot of people believe perhaps, is that poor exam results will ruin your life. What would you guys say about that?
No, they won't. They won't ruin your life.
They will not ruin your life. There are so many exams that you're going to take in your life, and each exam is going to have a different impact. And at the end of the day, there are solutions for anything that you want to do in life. So one single exam is not going to do anything to you, absolutely nothing in the end.
Definitely. It depends on where you're wanting to go in life as well, because there's some jobs that don't require great grades, or there's jobs that you don't even need to go to uni for. You've got college, you've got so many other places to go if your exams don't go the way you want to. Plus, there's so many people that haven't gotten amazing results and they still do something with their life, and it will not ruin your life in the slightest.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Just what you said there, Victoria. There are many different paths you can take. If you fail an exam, you can resit the exam. You can take you can take higher English at college, for example, if you weren't able to get it in your time at school. And there's many different pathways to get to wherever you want to go in life. So that is a big one that I'm glad we all agree. Poor exam results will not ruin your life. There is far more to life than that. Welcome to our announcement section of the podcast. In this section, we'll share all the great news that's going on within the school. The first piece of news we have for you today comes from Mr. Burgoyne in PE. The S1 boys football team are currently sitting top of the league and are undefeated, which is a fantastic result. Their next home game is against Lastwade on February 7th, and we would love to see as many teaching staff and pupils there as possible. Mr. Aitken is running the Lunchtime Classics Club, where we learn about the cultures of ancient Rome and ancient Greece. It is on every Tuesday. They've just started looking at Homer's Odyssey, one of the major works about the Trojan War. It's full of gods, heroes, monsters, and war. This is part of our progress for the students achieving the Olympus Challenge Award, given out by Classics for All and partner universities. The other big part of our Olympus Challenge will be a trip to the Hunterian Museum in Glasgow near the end of the year, where we will learn more about Roman Britain and the time the Romans controlled parts of Scotland. Anybody interested, staff or pupils, can come along Tuesday lunchtimes or ask Mr. Aitken in maths any questions. Thank you all for listening to the latest episode of the St. David's High School podcast. We hope this episode leaves you with a better understanding of how to prepare for your prelims and any revision techniques that you may now be able to use. Please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify to keep up to date with our most recent episodes. You can also follow us on Twitter at St. David's HS. Thank you.